Remember back a couple of years ago when Multiversus first came out and people like Angry Joe were declaring this to be the greatest thing since sliced bread? They pretended to be huge fans of Super Smash Bros. And that with WB characters, with well-known popular characters like Ultra Instinct Shaggy and the Iron Giant and Superman, they thought a fighting game like that would do well because of the license. They really thought that simply transplanting DC characters into Multiversus would somehow compete with Super Smash Brothers. And this was a big push all throughout the year that Multiversus first came out, right? Like they were really trying to meme this thing into relevancy. Like, oh man, look at Velma, like ooh, like she put Kobe in a cop car. Ooh, isn't that racist? Like they pulled out all the stops to try and make this thing relevant, right? They did everything in their power to make Multiversus a thing. And much like Nicktoons, much like Rivals of Aether, much like all of these other like Smash clone fighting games, what we got was a complete and utter failure. The masses don't seem to realize just how much work goes into Super Smash Bros. Games, right? They don't respect like the design philosophy or the character lineup, or like they really do think in a lot of ways that WB is somehow more relevant than Nintendo. They really think that Mario is not bigger than Spider-Man, right? People are still in this delusional mindset where they really think that Dungeons and Dragons is bigger than Zelda. It's like you are completely and totally out of touch with reality. We are going to see the Zelda movie outperform all three of the Lord of the Rings films. We are going to see like future Nintendo films dominate the box office. We are going to see a fall off of superhero slop. And what do you have left? Right? The only relevant characters in Multiversus are ones from the 90s, right? Because the West hasn't produced anything of value since 2006. Like 20 years of just derivative, lazy, uninspired slop. I remember hating the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy when I first saw it, right? I hated that cartoon. People are nostalgic for it now because everything that's come out since then has been even worse. So when you really put that into perspective, when you look at just how irrelevant like WB actually is, when you see the failure of Joker 2, when you see like how everything they're attempting with Suicide Squad, with pushing woke nonsense, with all ruining their Golden Goose franchise like Batman, right? Even the Arkham games aren't relevant anymore. When you look at all of this, when you look at Multiversus as a whole, you really start to realize that Nintendo has a much stronger branding than anyone else in the entertainment industry, right? Nobody else has been putting out as consistently high quality content as Nintendo has. And this is something that people like love to cope and seethe about, but it is true. Like anybody who has remained engaged with the company understands this. That an average Nintendo game is better than like 99% of like everything else that comes out in every other medium, right? Like it is shocking how much fun I'm having with Mario and Luigi Brothership right now, right? And that's just one example. And you can't even like cope and seethe and like, well, Superman could beat Mario and Luigi in a fight because that's not really true, is it? Those of us who have played Mario and Luigi, we know. Okay, so when you really take all that into consideration, when you see like the coping and seething from WB, like the shilling from shills like Angry Joe, right? When you see just how people are like refusing to acknowledge just how much better Nintendo is than Warhammer 40K, just as an example, right? People complain about 40K all the time with like the lore changes and the overpriced merch, right? The way the game is played, right? Warhammer is objectively not that great of an IP, but people worship it because, like, oh, we don't have anything else to play. But, like, Nintendo fans do all the time. We're so overloaded with great games every day that it really is impossible to keep up with them all, right? It is insane whenever you, like, look at the Switch's library and just realize just how much high quality content is on there. And titles like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate are just simply going to introduce more and more people to the wider world of Nintendo, right? We saw this happen with Fire Emblem, where like the introduction of Marth and Roy made Fire Emblem a huge hit in the West, and now it's one of Nintendo's tentpole franchises. And now we're seeing the same thing happen to Xenoblade, an IP that the industry has desperately trying to downplay since Xenoblade Chronicles 2 came out. Actually, since X came out, but this is the reality of what we're seeing here, where we constantly see people like try and pretend that like, oh, Baldur's Gate 3, that's bigger than Nintendo, like Space Marine 2 or Dragon Age Veilguard or Astro Butt, right? Like you see all of these games just being propped up, worshipped, and then quickly forgotten about because nobody actually cares about them, right? And Multiversus is a really good example of that. It was a very clear derivative product of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, right? It was clearly a copy. And when you see people like Angry Joe come out and try to say like, oh, it's better than Smash Bros. I like it way more than Smash Bros. And with the updates, it's going to get even better. You just roll your eyes at it, right? Like, I don't believe that anyone is being genuine when they say stuff like that. Like, all they're trying to do is push the anti-Nintendo agenda, right? They're constantly trying to trick you into thinking that, like, Super Smash Bros. Success is a fluke, that, like, some imitator is going to come along and do it better, that Nintendo's going to fall off at some point, or that it did fall off, like, 30 years ago, right? They keep trying to gaslight you about this, about, like, the success of Nintendo Alarmo, about Nintendo Switch Online, about the Nintendo Switch as a whole, about, like, the success of certain games. Tears of the Kingdom is being considered a failure by these people for only selling 20 million units, right? It's like one of the fastest games ever, selling games ever, but people are like really pushing this narrative. And it is going to fail, right? This is going to be like a really interesting thing to see over the next several years. I predict kind of a new Super Mario Bros. Style like realization over time, right? Where people look back and realize that like, wait a minute, I was told that New Super Mario Bros. Was a bad game and that no one liked it, but it sold 30 million units. And everybody I know like looks back on that game fondly and really enjoyed playing it. Like, Tears of the Kingdom is going to be the same way. Like, Mario Wonder is going to be the same way. Like, there will be no denying the reality of the success of Nintendo and its brand going forward. And even now that's true, but like people still have this weird like fixation on taking what game journals say seriously. Like, just look at how many people are adamantly trying to defend IGN's absurd score for Mario and Luigi Brothership, right? Even before I played the game, I knew like a 5 out of 10 was ridiculous. But now that I have and can safely tell you that yes, this is the best game in the series so far, and one of the best games of the year. Like, now that I've done that, like, IGN's score looks even more laughable, right? Nobody cares what IGN has to say about anything. And yet, when it comes to things like this, when it comes to, like, Pokemon, Alpha, Omega, like Ruby and Sapphire, like, oh, it has too much water. You have people, like, seriously trying to damage control them in those situations, right? You have people trying to bend over backwards to accommodate these people in order to keep up the farce just a little bit longer, to deny reality that Nintendo is the best at what they do and what they produce, right? They are desperately trying to get people from realizing that like Tears of the Kingdom is by far a far superior game to Elden Ring. It's not even really close. Elden Ring plus DLC, I should say by now. Like, Tears of the Kingdom was a more complete, lengthier, meatier game than Elden Ring plus DLC. That is crazy if you really think about it. But it is true. But the masses won't accept it because it goes against the carefully cultivated narrative that Nintendo is for kids and that I don't play games for children. Like it's a complete and total farce, especially when these people like obsess over things like Star Wars or Disney films or the Barbie movie. Even it's like, come on, like who are you trying to fool, really? Really, like the Multiversus thing, I think it really was like the Power World of like 2022 or whatever. Like it really was the same kind of thing of the same group of people propping up this insanely derivative product, trying to dismantle like Nintendo's hold on that IP and just completely and utterly failing at it, right? Warner Brothers has just issued a report that Multiversus has cost them 100 million to produce because of all the license fees, the voice actors they had to get, like 100 million for a game that has completely and totally bombed. How embarrassing.